Doesn't matter.
Gracias. Ay, tiene schon an. Wo willst du?
Hola, buenos días. Buenos días a todos. Gracias por estar aquí.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. It is a pleasure to have this conversation with two friends. Daniel Kehlamann, he's an extraordinary German writer. He wrote Till, a novel, which is available, and it's there. He shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and there is another novel which is the most sold novel after The Perfume of Patrick Süskind, and it's been translated into 40 languages. And he's also a script writer. He has also worked in theater, and he produced a film. It's the last work was the script of a film directed by Daniel Brühl, whom you know. He has wonderful films like Goodbye Lenin in Spanish, Salvador, of a work on a Spaniard anarchist. Also, he has worked with Quentin Tarantino, and he's a superhero, as you all know. Even though you cannot tell, he's a superhero. And we are going to speak about Next Door film, which is going to be shown tonight at the Heredia Theater. This conference is going to be in English because this way it's more fun, and that's the only language that the three of us speak. They speak German. I do not speak German. Daniel Brühl speaks perfect Spanish, but not Daniel Kehlamann. So we have one language less, and that's why we're going to hold this conference or dialogue in English. I hope it's convenient for each and every one of you.
Daniels, you're the Daniels today. We also have Daniels here in Colombia, but they don't have so much hair. You live in several cultures at the same time. Your full name is Daniel César Martín Brühl González.
Sí, señor.
Right? He was born in Barcelona, so you live in several cultures at the same time. You speak several languages. How does that help you find your way in your work as an actor? It's obviously one thing to do several roles, which is what every actor does, but your life allows you to live in several cultures and to understand different cultures from your different languages. How does that impact your work as an actor?
Yes, I've always felt that this is a huge gift, and various times I said to my parents, thank you for having met, that a German father in the late 50s traveled to Spain and married my mother, Marisa, whilst my uncles, Hein and Hartmut, married two French women called Françoise et Françoise. And now these beautiful women had to leave their beautiful cities, Paris, Toulouse, and Barcelona, my mother, to Cologne in West Germany, which isn't the nicest city. So it must have been love. But we benefited from that big time. There was a very multicultural vibe in our family. We grew up with the Spanish culture, my cousins with the French. We were very close, so we also learned how to speak French, etc. So that ultimately widened our scope personally. And when I decided to become an actor, it was also my immediate dream to cross borders and not be limited to the German market, but also to explore other film cultures. The other aspect, and that's also part of the reasons that I decided to tell this story and make this film, is that on the other hand, I very often had the feeling that I'm not really from one place.
Yeah.
And that sometimes causes a little bit of a complex, or makes me feel uncomfortable. And I always try to desperately
Belong.
please and belong. I'm sure if I would stay a week in Cartagena, I would try to pretend that I'm a Colombian. And so if there is still a home, it's in most of the cases, I guess, it's where you grew up most of the time, where you have your childhood memories, where you went to school. So that would be Cologne. Yes, I guess if you will watch the film, you will know what I mean.
Daniel, the other one. So your father was a TV director, your mother was an actress. You seem to have everything set for you to pursue a career in writing for the scene or playwriting, which is in part what you have done, but you are mainly a novelist. So how did this happen? How did you discover, probably through them and their love of stories, your vocation?
I think actually seeing my father's work as a director, not the work itself, but how all the circumstances made me at first really want to be a novelist, because and I'm very serious about this, because I saw how hard it is to get a film made. How hard it is actually when you want to make a film, and he worked a lot for television, also film for television, to convince people to give you the money for that, and and it's completely different in the European system than in the American system, because it's mostly subsidized, but you still have a lot of convincing to do, and it takes a lot of time, and a lot of things you really want to do also don't work out. And I think that was the main reason, and also of course that I loved novel, and I think novel is still the literary form closest to my heart, but also the fact that when you write books, it all depends on you. No one can show up and tell you, I'm not quite convinced you should, so you don't write it. It's really up to you. The worst thing that can happen is that you don't find a publisher, but then you can still write the thing and hope that someone will publish it in the future. I started out writing novels. I saw myself as a novelist. I really love movies. I love the theater, but it was just not part of what I was doing. And then my father died, unfortunately, sadly, around the same moment when my book, Measuring the World, became very successful. So I became quite independent, and in a way I hadn't been before. And also, I think maybe some kind of anxiety of influence had gone away with my father not being there anymore. So about that time I started to write for the theater. And I saw how much I love to write scenes, dialogues, and that it was really something that I enjoyed tremendously. And then of course, then at some point movies also come up. So I was asked to write the screenplay for Measuring the World, which was turned into a film in Germany. So I did learn a little bit the mechanics of screenplay writing, but I had always known screenplays, again, because of my father. When he wrote screenplays, he was actually dictating them into a little dictaphone, which then somebody later typed, and I was allowed to listen. So I actually heard how screenplays work, how scenes work, how dialogues work. And so it all felt natural that at some point I would also write movies, then this idea that Daniel had came up, and maybe we talk about that later. But it felt very natural for me to that this is also something that I explore in writing, and that I enjoy a lot.
Yes, I do want to talk about the film as soon as possible, but there's something that I've always wanted to ask you both. You're both interested in the past, in a very particular way, both interested in history. Both Daniel Kehlmann's novels that I discussed before, not every one of his novels, short of that, is a historical novel, but these two are, Till and the Measuring and Measuring the World. And Daniel Brühl, you have made a lot of films and a TV series about the past. No? The Alienist is set in the 19th century. You have interpreted this Catalan anarchist Salvador Puig Antich, who was, you will tell the story, but also a political prisoner at the time of the Chilean dictatorship, right, in Colonia. So what is it that you find in the past? What is this curiosity or this drive to do films about the historical past?
Well, I guess it makes us understand who we are at present if we look back in time and in history and know where we are coming from. That I always found very thrilling and interesting, and also the fact that there is not that one history. You always try to understand it as you do, but ultimately it's always a subjective perspective. Since I read, War and Peace, in this very last part, when Tolstoy has this long passage about there's not that one history, and making the example with Russia and Napoleon, the history that the French learn is very different to the one the Russians learn. So I always found that very compelling. With what kind of narrative and history perspective did I grow up, and isn't it interesting to see it from different angles? And it's always a responsibility if you do something like that, especially in fiction. You have to ask yourself twice. I mean, you know that you're doing fiction, so it doesn't pretend to be a documentary, but even so, you have to be okay with the vision of what this filmmaker is doing with this chapter in history, So there have been examples. As a German actor, I think I was offered every highest ranking Nazi, and a couple of times I was wearing the uniform, which we all sooner than later have to wear. But you have to be very careful also with that, But yeah, history has always fascinated me. Period.
Yeah. And what kind of challenges are there in playing people that actually existed, like this Salvador Puig Antich? Why don't you tell the story about who he is? And I've heard you talk about the difficulties in interpreting this man and his execution.
Yeah. Again, this was an interesting example of more recent history. I was born in 78. In 75, Franco died, so the dictatorship was over. But this man I was portraying was an activist, an anarchist in Barcelona who opposed against the regime and was one of the last victims who was killed, by the way, in this most horrific medieval kind of way with the garrote vil, and was one of the last sentences that Franco signed from his bed before he peacefully passed away. So, and because I was born in Barcelona and I've grown up in then a very different city, in a very different Europe, I was interested in that time because that was the time when my parents, had already stayed in Barcelona a lot, had gone to the manifestations and to the rallies against Franco. But it wasn't very much a part of a conversation to be had at home once that I was a kid and old enough to understand about it. So by doing the film, I remember that my parents all of a sudden remembered these days, and my mother opened up and talked about everything from the beginning of the civil war in Spain, about her youth. So I found out firstly a lot about my parents, a lot about my mother, and then ultimately of who I am as a son of her. But I immediately felt again that complex. I've mainly grown up in Germany, so to play such an iconic Catalan figure like this man who is considered for many as a martyr and a hero, can I possibly play this guy? I felt too German. Again, I felt like I was wrong for that. And I said that at the very first conversation. Maybe you should look for someone else. But they insisted, fortunately. And then I said, okay, I can only do that if I have a close relationship with the sisters who are still alive. To really, apart from reading a lot about the time and watching documentaries and all rest of it, but it is to gather as much information from sources who really knew him well, and that was crucial. Whenever I did movies, like when I played Niki Lauda, the Formula One driver, again, I insisted I want to spend as much time with that person as I can possibly do, you know, because this gives you much more than everything you can read about them.
Yeah. How about you, Daniel? What is it that you look for in history? Till is a picaresque novel. I cannot recommend this novel strongly enough. It moves quickly, it's full of adventure, and it is crossed by a meditation on many things that are of interest today. Superstition, fanaticism, religion, religious excesses, politics. So what is it that you find in the past that interests you, and why don't you describe a little bit of Till, so that people can know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think the thing that really got me interested in Till and in that, in the, not the character, but the novel, the whole project, was really how different the human mind was before Enlightenment. So
the novel takes place?
It takes place in the 17th century in Germany and Northern Europe, in the first half of the 17th century, in the time called in the big cataclysmic event called the 30 Years' War, and it's a really moment of meltdown in European history. I started working on it in a time that was very different to this. I mean, we are experiencing a lot of meltdowns right now, but I started working on it in 2012 already, so in a comparatively very calm and peaceful world, weirdly. And what interested me was really how different the human mind was, and following from that, the fact that there is no such thing, or there doesn't seem to be a thing, as like a never-changing substance of the human mind.
Yeah.
It's human beings were really profoundly different. The way they felt, the way they thought, the way they reacted towards the world, and there's a lot of historical fiction and also historical films, and where when you interview the people who
Hold on, something happened?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. When people who work on it or who made it or invented it give interviews, they say, this is still so relevant for us today. And of course it is, but what I was interested in at first was everything that's not relevant for us today.
Yeah.
Like just visiting the completely alien country that the past was. I think do I have to? Hello?
You're
my
on.
back? Okay.
Yeah, go.
And in a way, then also it is my other historical novel, Measuring the World, which I wrote in 2004 and was published in 2005, is a book about the European Enlightenment. And Till is a book about what the world was like before Enlightenment. So a friend of mine who saw the manuscript said, "This is your real love poem to Enlightenment." Yes. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's true. The fact that it became so relevant because of all those terrible things that happened, even as I said, even the plague, which plays a part in the book, showed up again in history. Not the plague, but something like the plague.
Yeah.
just a little bit less dangerous comparatively. Even that came back. So, but for me, the past is so important that we realize that all the things we take for granted, we all live in the present and take everything the way it is, like something necessary. And of course, it has to be like this.
Yeah.
And most things in our life don't have to be like this. And we see this very clearly when we look at the moment in history that's 100, 200, 300 years past. Because everything seems very strange.
Yes.
And I think, and that's the most important point of relevance when you write about especially the distant past, that it teaches you how different things could be even now, and that things do not have to be necessarily the way they are.
Yeah. There's it doesn't seem that way, but there's a little bit of very important history in the film. So I'd like to turn to the film
Yes.
right now. ¿Podemos poner el corto de la película, por favor? The Next Door is the title in English, La Puerta de Al Lado. Cuando estén listos, ahí está.
Wann kommst du wieder?
Morgen Nachmittag.
Entschuldigung, könnten Sie ein Foto?
Na klar.
Also ein Foto von uns beiden.
Entschuldigung.
Hey Siri, Mathis anrufen. Aber sag dem Fahrer, der soll mich im Loch an der Ecke abholen.
Moin, moin.
Wenn das mal nicht Tom Cruise ist. Na, meinst du wieder auf Weltreise?
Ich habe ein Casting. Ganz schön dickes Ding.
Kann ich ein Autogramm haben?
Haben Sie was zu schreiben?
Nee.
Haben Sie ein Papier?
Nee. Danke.
Gern geschehen.
Sie erkennen mich nicht, oder?
Sie wohnen in meinem Haus?
Ach, nein, Sie wohnen in meinem. Ich bin schon ein bisschen länger da.
Ich glaube, ich muss los.
Ihr Flug geht erst 1:30. Sie haben doch noch Zeit.
Woher wissen Sie das?
Ihr Stasi-Leute wissen sowas. Ich kann in eure Wohnung sehen. Von meinem Fenster aus. Plötzlich konnte ich nie mehr wegsehen. Das hat mich fast wahnsinnig gemacht.
Wir sind hier, weil du mir was sagen willst. Also sag's mir oder halt die Fresse.
Okay. Ja, ich halt die Fresse.
Das nennt man Stalking.
Sag mal, hast du ein Ding an der Waffel?
Sie haben mich angelogen.
Schockierend, nicht wahr?
Dafür gehst du ins Gefängnis.
Ich habe Handschuhe getragen.
Der Bruno, immer für die anderen da.
Dann denkt man, dass man ein Leben hat und plötzlich ist alles eine Lüge.
Sie Schwein. Wie viel willst du?
Jetzt hast du mich verletzt.
Halt die Fresse!
Entschuldigung, jetzt habe ich Sie schon wieder geduzt, aber das passiert mir immer wieder, weil ich Sie so gut kenne.
So, I know that the origin of the film is autobiographical in a way. It's something that you lived, kind of, and then you transformed a situation that you experienced into the original idea. How did that happen?
Yes, actually, the idea was born in Spain, in Barcelona, in Gracia, in a neighborhood where I had moved to in 2010. It was the first time that I found my own apartment, that I was not living with my parents anymore, I wasn't staying at my friend's house, and I was not in a hotel. So I was very proud of that, what I was telling before, feeling local, feeling real, feeling, that I belong to that place. So I was ridiculous. I was running around with my keys in my hand all the time when I was in the streets to show the people I live here. So, soc d'aquí, soy de Barcelona. I was talking about the football club all the time and, speaking with my rusty Catalan, to be liked by the people in the neighborhood. And I liked one restaurant a lot, which is in the Plaza del Sol, if you ever go, where people from all different social classes go and have lunch. And I like to go there to eat an arroz, una paella. And one day there was a big guy, apparently working class, like a heavy, strong dude, sitting opposite me and observing me like in a Sergio Leone Western, without blinking. And I felt immediately intimidated, and I could tell immediately that he disliked me profoundly, because I was sitting there with my little suitcase and my shirt and, you know, being friendly with everyone. So he saw through me, and then that was the kickoff in my head. I immediately had this idea of a guy who is privileged, who is living a fancy life, living in a chic apartment in Barcelona. And in the original idea, I thought that this guy could be a worker, a scaffolder working on the facade of a house for months, and then observing my apartment for months and finding out a lot about my life, finding out things that I even don't know. And one day, you know, he would wait for me in this restaurant again, and then a duel, like a Western, without weapons but with words, would start. And that should be an encounter between two different social classes, dealing with gentrification, with social inequality, but all from a very intimate, starting point, you know. And then I quickly realized that I cannot write. Years later, I found my notes, and I was terrible. It's, I actually never showed it to you. So that was devastating. And second of all, I just didn't have a structure to be able to lift that film in Spain. And then, it's a very long answer. Then I went back to Berlin, and then in the meantime, I found a production. I joined a production company. All of a sudden, I had a structure. I had people who asked me, what about directing? Because they knew that I always dreamt of directing a first film. And I thought the first film should be very personal, should be something I really know about. So this idea came back, and I still had the problem. I cannot write it, not even in German. And then I was thinking of my friend Daniel, whom I'd met a couple of years before that, and thought it might be his cup of tea. And I mean, he's one of the, if not the most famous German writer. I thought it would be a bit over the top to call him and ask him to do my film, but I thought, there's nothing to lose. He's a charming guy. In a very polite way, he will say no, and that's it. You know, the Austrians are very elegant with that. You know, so and then but we met, and he immediately engaged, and then it took off from there, really, because he immediately understood everything what I wanted to tell with that, and even went beyond that. So it just, and that's the nice thing when you have a symbiotic relationship, you know. I still think, because we want to go on working with each other, I can always tell, okay, I might have a good idea, but then I need someone like him to filter it, to elevate it, and that has been a wonderful experience throughout.
Daniel, how do you remember this? Getting in touch with the first ideas and dealing with them and the process. Tell us about the process.
Yeah, I love the idea immediately. Does the mic work now, or am I? Okay, good. I love the idea immediately, which is kind of unusual, because I'm sure you have the same experience. When you're a writer, people come to you with ideas, and often they're very good ideas, but they're not something that you're interested at this point in your life and your writing. So you usually have to say, this is really great, but not for me, not right now. And so I was kind of used to giving that answer, but he told me this idea, which I felt was exactly for me and was exactly what I wanted to do, because I love two-handers. I love two-person plays.
Yes.
And I'd also written one before that just consists of two people in conflict and in basically talking to each other, but in a dramatic situation.
Yeah.
And I love the social implications of the story, And I felt immediately like this, we can go somewhere with this. And so I started writing pretty immediately. And then we had those wonderful long sessions when we talked it all over. And the thing is, it's a very personal movie in a way that Daniel is using a lot of his own life and his own life as a famous actor. So there's a lot of things he told me and was very not afraid of making fun of himself. Like, for example, Bruno makes fun of the fact that actors get, if you're a famous actor, you get a lot of stuff like clothes and you get a watch and so that's something that actors usually don't like to talk about for obvious reasons. But he told me all these things that we felt like. So he told me all these actually bad things. That's not a bad thing that they give you clothes, but things that kind of actors are reluctant to talk about, and said, "Oh, Bruno's gonna like that. That's something for Bruno." So that was one of the phrases we used a lot. Like, "Oh, that's something for Bruno to use," and then there's also this wonderful thing that I felt. Daniel has this amazing ability to improvise, and I'm not sure all actors have that. So some actors are just very good with lines, but he's a great improv actor.
Yeah.
And so I often because in a two-hander, which this also basically is, even though you have other people in it, you have to. The hardest part is the structure. You always something new has to happen. You have to have kind of chapters. And the power dynamic between the two people has to shift constantly. Like, you cannot just have two people talking, like we are talking now. There has to be a constant shift in power. Otherwise, it doesn't work in a dramatic way. Yeah. And so there was a lot of figuring out and a lot of moving parts to figure out where to put them. But often I just asked Daniel, so what would he say now? What would he say? And not just his character, also Bruno, the other character, or someone else. There are other people coming in and out and talking to the two, and it was amazing. I saw him kind of move into this place where actors go when they do improv, which I think is a lot like where we go when we invent prose. And then he came up with amazing ideas and solutions. And I was writing in my notebook while he was improvising, and I was able to use all of that. And now I'm writing other things, it feels having a great improv actor in the room while you're writing is like having a super powerful car, and afterwards you have to walk again. So I miss him in the room when I'm writing, like constantly. So it was a lot of fun to do this.
Were you ever afraid of going too far in his self-deprecation? Because the movie makes a lot of fun about character.
No, I didn't think he went too far. I felt like I was amazed how far he was willing to go
against himself.
I was very much in awe of that. I felt like if I would use myself, I wouldn't be that courageous. But we both agreed that the farther we go, the better.
Yeah.
But I've never felt like I should stop him. I felt like it's his choice and it's good for the movie.
Yeah. There's a part of German history and Berlin history that is kind of important to get the full understanding of the film. You can enjoy the film without knowing this. The film is self-explanatory. It gives you all the information you need to understand the film, the conflict there is. But I think the more you know, the better about this. In the original idea, it was a question of social tension, social classes in Barcelona. But this is political too.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what the difference between East and West Berlin means in the film and all that?
Well, that's very true, because when I was asked, do you want to direct something, and I was thinking back of that idea, I quickly realized that this idea had actually become much better and had grown in my head translating it, transferring it to Berlin, and telling now a story between neighbors and not just a worker working on the facade, but really people living next door for years in the same neighborhood, living in the same house, but being from two different worlds. Because the clash between East and West in Germany is a very relevant subject at the moment.
So Daniel's character comes from West Berlin, and the other character, Bruno, comes from East Berlin. Yes.
Exactly. And again, this is very much based on my personal experience. When I was young, when I was 20, I did this film Goodbye Lenin, which made me fall in love with Berlin instantly. And also talking about timing, when does a movie come out, also is very crucial to its success or failure. Goodbye Lenin these days wouldn't have the success it had back in the days. It was just the right timing, enough time after the toning down of the wall, still with the spirit in the society and in the country of, yeah, step by step we will grow, you know, together, we will become one country. There was more hope, I would say, or maybe I was just younger and a bit naive, and I wanted to believe that. So I moved to East Berlin, but very quickly then, as part of the gentrification process. It still happens to me today. And because I moved into an apartment, which is not as fancy as the one you will see in the film, but still, I'm in East Berlin, I moved to the neighborhood where everybody from the West, the young hip people wanted to move to, I did as well. And you live, it's almost like Hitchcock, you live in these typical Berlin courtyards, patios, not as nice as the patios here, but you can see, you can look into the windows, into the lives of the other people. And then when I had this idea between these two neighbors, I thought this makes the story, the whole story, much more substantial, because it tells something about not only the social clash, which everybody would, you know, understand, but also about recent or the status quo as how I see Berlin at the moment now, 20 years after Goodbye Lenin. This is a different Berlin film.
Yeah. Do you think in some ways this film is the dark side of the moon to Goodbye Lenin?
Exactly, yeah.
That was quick, yes. Daniel, so your wife, Anne, is an East Berliner. Mm-hmm. You live in front of, in Berlin, you live in front of the Palace of Tears, which is a train station at the very border between East and West Berlin, where people from East Berlin used to say goodbye to their relatives and their loved ones who were going to West Berlin. They thought they might never see them again, etc., etc. So this is why that place is called the Palace of Tears. So how much of your personal life went into the writing of this? Did you do a lot of research with Anne, your wife? Did you ask questions? How was it to live there, etc., etc.?
Yes, I mean, a lot of, well, I'm not sure I can call that research, but I knew a lot about from my wife, I knew a lot about how the breakdown of the GDR had fractured so many lives. Yeah. How a whole, and that has nothing to do with nostalgia about the GDR. Absolutely not. It's just a fact that the system changed completely, the world changed completely, and even though on the whole it's obviously a change for the better if a dictatorship goes away, it does mean that a lot of people have to rethink absolutely everything in their lives, whether they want to or not. Everything changes. Yes. They're thrown into a completely new world, and for a lot of people, like really a lot, there was a traumatic thing. There was a deep, deep trauma, and that is something that is not a lot, that doesn't come up a lot in German, in the discussions in Germany, in German culture, in movies, in films. There are some books about it.
Yeah.
Not too many, actually. And I heard about that a lot from Anna. I know a lot of people to whom this happened, I felt like there was I would never pretend that I'm an expert on this. I grew up in cozy Vienna, far away from the GDR. I was never in the GDR when it still existed. I never saw it from inside. But I felt like I knew enough to pretend, which is what we do as writers. We know enough. We hopefully we know enough to pretend, and then we hope we get away with it. Yeah. And then also it was always I felt there was always a safety net, because that's also addressed in the film. So Daniel in the film, who made a famous GDR movie, who starred in it, gets a lot of grief and anger from Bruno for getting it all wrong.
Yeah.
So that's one of the sources of Bruno's hatred. So I felt like we are two people from the West who are trying to get it right, but it's already in the movie that people from the West usually get it wrong.
Yeah. So
but I hope we didn't get it wrong.
How was the character born, this Bruno? I mean, everybody today is saying we don't talk about Bruno, but let's talk about Bruno. How was the character born? What implications went into the imagination of this man?
Well, again, I gave him a general idea, and then he elaborated it and wrote these wonderful dialogues that blew me away already in the first draft. That he wrote in 3 weeks. He is scaringly fast. I was telling him about the encounters I had with a special type of East Berliners who sit in these dark East Berlin bars, which are like a saloon in a Western or in an Eastern. That when I go in and they recognize me, the temperature goes below zero, and they make, in their typically charming East Berlin way, some comment, which usually can be very direct. This is how the Berliners are, Hey, fancy pants. Your last film was shit. Oh, thank you. Can I have a beer? No. It can happen sometimes, And also when I moved into the house where I now live, I was getting this reaction at first from the neighbors who are still from the East, thinking like, oh, now this actor is moving in, And so I already had a specific idea of how he should look like, and very quickly this amazing actor came to my mind. Funnily, Daniel had the same idea, so we were thinking about it, and he was writing this part with him in our heads, which was very inspiring, I guess, because there wouldn't have been a definite plan B. This was written for Peter Kurt, and I don't know. When you immediately had the idea of him, the job that he does, that was something very important.
That was very important. I think, we're not giving too much away. That's not a big spoiler if I say what it is. Because a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine who I went to university with, had that job, like working on a hotline for credit card hotline. So when you lose your credit card, there's a number, you call that number, they read you think it's your bank, but it's actually not, it's some other specialized place where people do that. and they read you the things that were done with your credit card, and then you can say, no, I didn't do that. That's actually someone else who stole my card. Then that gets blocked. They send you a new card. The thing is, those people have total access to your bank account.
Yeah.
And not just the people who call, like every bank account in the bank they're working for. And of course, that's what I knew through my friend, of course they use that a lot because it's fun and they're bored.
Yes.
So when no one calls, they just look, so what did the chancellor pay, what did the chancellor recently buy, how much does the president make? So they can look all that up, and of course they do it. They will tell you, no, we don't do it, but they do it because they can. And I felt like there would be the more interesting option for Bruno to have that job, so not in an analog way, look through the window, but look on his bank account.
Yes.
And be the neighbor. So he has an analog part of the information by being next door, nebenan, and the digital part by being able to access the bank account. And that kind of shaped the character, because then also he's a very intelligent guy. And that also opens up the whole Stasi background in Germany. People
What is that?
doing surveillance on other people has, of course, a big, sad, dark tradition, especially in Eastern Germany. No dictatorship had such a record of surveillance, of surveillance being done by one part of the population on another part of the population. There was much less of that in Poland and the Czech and Czechoslovakia than in Germany. Somehow Germans like that, apparently, to spy on other people. It's and then write reports. It's just a sad fact. And so yeah, that all shaped the character. But what I never did as a writer, to write it for an act. I mean, of course, I did it with Daniel's character because it was obvious, but that was his role, he would play it, but also to write for that very specific actor. So we always had him in mind. And the crazy thing was, we didn't ask him. We only asked, we decided we will ask him when we're done, so we can give him the full script. And then the script hopefully will be so convincing that he cannot say no. But he was still in Babylon Berlin, where he was playing the evil cop. It was an amazing role. So we were watching Babylon Berlin anxiously, and then when at the end of the second season he gets blown to pieces, we were so happy.
Yeah.
So we saw him die in that show, and we're like, okay, now he'll be available probably.
And I had met him in Goodbye Lenin again. Very funny. Yeah. He was playing a supporting part. That's the first time I ever met him.
Right.
So that was also
a
funny coincidence.
Well, it's it's a whole genre. This huis clos, the film, the play that happens in just one space. 90% of this film happens in this space. And within this genre, it's one of the best things I've seen. It's full of tension, and you keep asking yourself, how will the film get out of this little problem, this little corner it has taken itself into? And the solution is always wonderful. So congratulations to you both. Vamos a hacer algunas preguntas, pero primero quiero pedirles un aplauso para los Danieles alemanes. Muchas gracias. Tenemos 10 minutos para algunas preguntas y a mí me están mandando una para Daniel Brühl. Daniel, we have a question for you. You said once, some years ago, that your goal as an actor was to participate in 10 films of which you could feel proud.
It's a lot.
Have you managed that?
I think I said 5.
Do you even remember saying this?
I remember saying 5. 10 is a lot.
Inflation.
I'm working on it. No, there's a couple of ones that stand out. That I'm happy with, thinking back of the experience that I had working on them, but also with the result. Some actors, friends of mine, don't give that much, and I envy that. They don't care so much about the result. They just they just want to have a good experience whilst they're doing it, and then they don't care that much. But I always did. I think always of the final. That's actually something that was drawing me to direct, to be fully responsible, and to not be surprised when I go to the premiere, but to sit in the editing room to decide, you know, like being the captain of the ship, this shot will be in the film and this not, you know, because as an actor, sometimes you give it away. You're very vulnerable, no?
Yeah.
Because you're not participating in the whole process. But to answer that question, I would say maybe I have 4 to 5 that I'm really proud of, that stand there as a DVD when my guests come. I have them there.
Yeah.
And actually, I have to say, I'm happy with my debut as a director. I really am.
Yes.
Maybe I would change minor things, but overall, this is a film that I will hopefully always like.
Yeah. So a friend of mine is asking you, what is the last sketchy purchase you did with your credit cards? Daniel Kehlamann, you go first.
Sketch purchase?
Sketchy purchase.
Sketchy, like something.
Yeah, like problematic, like you know.
That's it. Yeah,
shady.
Yeah, I get it. That's an interesting. I wish I had an amazingly
Come on.
committing answer to that. What was the last?
Clock is ticking.
Okay, you go first. And
Go
I think
first.
about it.
Actually, I wrote all the jokes. He just...
He's a serious guy.
All the shady things I pay cash.
Very good.
my answer.
Very good. Bueno, podemos abrir al...
We can. There is a mic. I think that you can shout out a question. I'm sorry, but without the mic, we cannot hear the question.
Well, first, that book I wrote quite a while ago, the Humboldt novel, but of course it's still very close to my heart. The thing is, nobody can really follow Humboldt's steps anymore. No, I'm not joking. The landscape has changed. The landscape has changed actually because of erosion. Mountains have changed. He traveled on. The 4,000-year-old tree he's describing is gone in Tenerife. So and obviously the cities are still there, but they're profoundly different places. So and that's also why I didn't feel completely intimidated to write that book without a close knowledge of South America. Because in a way that South America is not the South America that Humboldt traveled is not a South America someone can still go to, even physically. I won't follow Humboldt's steps, and sadly, no one else can anymore.
Sí.
How I combine that, or
Yeah.
I love well, one of the things that's most that creates a lot of energy in writing is to change. So I love to change between things. So I had just published Till when Daniel came with this idea, so I felt like it's wonderful to do something else now, and to write a film. And I also wrote another film about roughly the same time. A little bit later, I wrote an adaptation of Thomas Mann's last novel, the Adventures of Felix Krull, Confidence Man. And so I did some film writing, and then I felt like now I need a change again, and I need to move to get going with a novel again. So because it's lovely to collaborate with people, but it's also great for a while then to just be completely on your own, and you can make any decision without someone showing up and telling you, no, this will cost 500,000 euro to make. Can you please do it differently? In a novel, all that doesn't matter. So, but the change is the wonderful thing.
¿A quién puedo? Por favor.
Thank you. This question is for both Daniels, and it's at the beginning of your careers, how did you used to thank you. How do you used to deal with frustration and rejection, and has this outlook changed over the years?
No. Frustration hasn't changed. I wish. No, it's the. I guess this is something that some people don't really understand. This is also something that the movie is about. That behind that supposedly perfect facade, there's a lot of emptiness and the void and sadness and depression. So there's so many actors nowadays, like the character I play, unlike me, because I'm a bit different, I hope you will see the difference, who, express themselves and expose themselves in an extreme way. This is scary nowadays, and the ones who do it the most are sometimes the ones who are deeply depressed. It is tough to constantly live with judgment all the time, with all these voices, and to try to block this out and to switch it off or lower the volume and just follow your compass is something that still up until now is very difficult. And nowadays it has become worse and worse. There's constant judgment and the necessity of the people to tell you, to shout it in your face. You're horrible, you're shit, So to be stable, to live with that and to try and stay calm. This is a real challenge. Also, we were talking about this a lot yesterday on the plane. I mean,
yeah, it's hard, but it's also, I think, it's necessary that you still feel the frustration, because what's the alternative? We all frequently meet these types of older, very successful artists, writers, painters, directors who kind of live in a complete bubble of narcissism that nothing can penetrate anymore. And that's also not good. In a way, the great thing, and you're very privileged as a writer, as Norman Mailer said, because as a writer you get afforded this miraculous thing, you can always lift yourself by your bootstraps. So if you're really frustrated because people don't appreciate your writing, you can use that frustration in the writing. And you can turn any kind of dark feeling into something productive, which is great. And so you shouldn't completely avoid that and surround yourself just with positive, nice opinions. Even though those constant negative voices are terrible, you can still use them and turn them into something productive, even though it hurts. But you can then use the hurt.
You have another question, which might be the last one, for Daniel Brühl. They're asking you, how did mocking your own persona in the film change your perception of yourself?
That's a good one.
It was cleansing. Yes. I feel purged because the most horrible sides of me that sometimes showed up in moments, in fractions. The combination of all that is what this guy is. So I definitely don't want to be like this man. my wife, when she saw that film for the first time, was repulsed. She says, bah! And because we're playing this game with the persona, even my wife was confused and treated me differently for 2 or 3 days. It's like, oh, qué asco. No, but it's fun to play. There was always a clear distance, and I could use these little monstrous, narcissistic, self-centered, shitty moments that I've gone through in my life, and just use them. Yeah, I would say I'm cleansed.
Yeah, very good. Siento muchísimo no tener más tiempo para contestar a sus...
I'm sorry, I do not have more time. A round of applause for them. Thank you very much, everyone.